The morning light in Ramallah settles over the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where Palestinian officials prepare for another day of urgent diplomacy. The air carries a mix of tension and routine, but inside the government compound, activity is anything but ordinary. Cameras are being positioned, correspondents check their microphones, and aides move briskly through the corridors. They know today's message is not a standard briefing. It is an appeal that Palestinian officials believe could influence international legal norms, bilateral relations, and the already fragile balance between security, politics, and human rights in the region. As Palestinian Deputy Foreign Minister Omar Awadallah steps into the press conference hall, journalists rise slightly from their seats, adjusting their lenses and preparing their recorders. It is a familiar scene, yet today's topic carries a gravity that seems to tighten the atmosphere. Just days earlier, a committee in Israel's parliament approved an amendment that would introduce the death penalty for individuals convicted of deadly attacks. Legislation that Palestinian officials argue would overwhelmingly target Palestinians and escalate an already volatile situation. The proposal, championed by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, passed its first reading, advancing a legislative path that Palestinians view as alarming and dangerous. As Awadallah approaches the podium, the backdrop of Palestinian flags stands in stark contrast to the subdued expressions of the journalists facing him. The government emblem behind him reflects years of political struggle and diplomatic outreach. His tone, when he begins speaking, underscores urgency rather than ceremony. He explains that this moment is not simply about responding to a legislative procedure, but about confronting what he describes as a profound threat to the rights and lives of Palestinian detainees. He begins with a statement that has already started circulating among diplomatic circles. Letters have been sent to foreign ministers in all countries around the world to discuss the law concerning prisoners and the execution of Palestinian detainees, and to urge these countries to act quickly to stop this law. His words capture the essence of the Palestinian strategy, an international campaign that seeks to mobilize governments before the Israeli bill can advance further. Behind the cameras, several diplomats and legal advisors listen quietly. They know that the message Awadallah delivers today is aimed at the world's most influential capitals: Washington, London, Paris, Berlin, Beijing, Moscow, Brussels, and the regional powers scattered across the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. The letters, according to Palestinian officials, call on governments to interpret the Israeli bill not as domestic criminal legislation, but as a measure with broader implications under international humanitarian law, especially given Israel's long-standing role as an occupying power in Palestinian territories. Awadallah continues, explaining that this diplomatic push is not emerging in isolation. It is rooted, he says, in months of documentation, testimonies, and evidence collection. In addition, he continues, we have heard, followed, and documented horrific testimonies, some of which have been submitted not only to international courts, but also to international bodies such as special rapporteurs and international commissions of inquiry. With these words, he broadens the conversation from legislative debate to human rights concerns. He suggests that Palestinian prisoners have faced conditions that raise grave legal questions, including allegations of torture and mistreatment. In front of him, reporters scribble notes rapidly. Some glance at each other, signaling the weight of what is being said. Human rights organizations, including both local Palestinian groups and international watchdogs, have for months highlighted alleged abuses in Israeli detention facilities. Israel has rejected many of these accusations, arguing that its policies are based on security considerations, particularly amid ongoing tensions across the West Bank and a deeply polarized political climate inside Israel itself. Still, Awadallah's statements reflect the Palestinian Authority's determination to elevate these accusations in global forums. Outside the conference hall, the facade of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stands tall as Palestinian flags ripple under a soft breeze. These flags, which have accompanied countless diplomatic appeals over the years, seem to symbolize not only nationalism, but exhaustion. Years of back and forth negotiations, confrontations, international statements, and bitter disputes over sovereignty, borders, and rights. Today's statement adds yet another chapter to this long narrative. Awadallah's briefing shifts to an even more serious tone as he describes the next phase of the Palestinian response. He asserts that the Palestinian Authority intends to use every diplomatic, legal and political mechanism available to challenge what he describes as violations committed against Palestinian detainees. His second major declaration reflects that intent. We will be using all the available diplomatic, legal and political tools to bring the perpetrators of the crime of torture against our prisoners to justice, of the crime of sexual abuse, of the crimes of rape that we documented, and all the organisations in Palestine already documented these testimonies. We will be following this track legally, politically and diplomatically. That statement, translated from Arabic, is not delivered lightly. It signals that the Palestinian leadership is preparing for an extensive international legal campaign, one that likely includes referrals to the International Criminal Court, petitions to the United Nations Human Rights Council, and pressure on states that retain unilateral or bilateral leverage over Israel. The civil society organisations that Awadallah references, human rights groups, medical associations, legal aid centres, have been compiling testimonies that could potentially form the basis of legal submissions. For many Palestinians, the death penalty bill represents not just a piece of legislation, but a symbol of the overall power imbalance they experience under occupation. The Palestinian Authority argues that applying such a law within the context of occupation violates core principles of international law, including the Geneva Conventions, which restrict the use of punitive measures against occupied populations. Israeli proponents, however, argue that the bill is necessary to deter deadly attacks and protect Israeli citizens. They say that the most severe crimes require the most severe penalties and that the law would apply only in cases involving clear intent to kill. As journalists analyse Awadallah's statements and prepare their questions, the broader political backdrop looms large. Israel's internal politics have shifted significantly in recent years, with far-right parties gaining considerable influence. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, one of the strongest advocates of the death penalty bill, has long campaigned for harsher measures against Palestinians involved in attacks against Israelis. His supporters frame the proposal as long overdue. Critics, including many Israeli legal experts, human rights activists and opposition lawmakers, argue that the bill is extreme, discriminatory and potentially damaging to Israel's international standing. For Palestinians, the debate has stirred fears of intensified repression. Many worry that such legislation could be weaponized in a highly unequal justice system. Palestinian defendants tried in Israeli courts, particularly military courts, face conviction rates that critics describe as overwhelmingly high. Introducing capital punishment in this context heightens concerns about due process and fair trial rights. Awadallah's appeal, therefore, becomes part of a broader strategic effort to frame the death penalty bill as a violation not only of Palestinian rights, but of norms and standards recognized globally. His mention of special rapporteurs and international commissions of inquiry suggests that the Palestinian Authority wants the issue examined through mechanisms that have historically scrutinized conflict zones, occupation contexts, and alleged abuses by state authorities. The journalists listening to him are aware that the issue comes at a time of heightened global polarization regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. International responses vary widely. Some governments remain cautious, unwilling to interfere in what they consider Israeli domestic policy. Others have already issued statements expressing concern about the bill's implications. Awadallah's letters, therefore, represent an attempt to shift the diplomatic balance to push countries that typically remain silent into taking a public stand. As his press conference continues, the political ramifications of his statements become increasingly clear. The Palestinian Authority is not simply reacting to the bill. It is attempting to mobilize a coordinated international response while emphasizing that the issue concerns not only lawmaking in Israel, but the treatment of Palestinians under occupation. Outside the ministry, traffic moves steadily along Ramallah's roads, but within political circles, discussions intensify, diplomats begin drafting cables, analysts prepare reports, and journalists file quick updates before expanding their coverage for evening broadcasts. Human rights groups release statements quoting Awadallah's remarks and calling for global attention to both the bill and the testimonies his ministry referenced. As the coverage unfolds throughout the day, political analysts on international news networks begin offering interpretations rooted in the region's long history of legal conflict. Some note that Israel has not carried out civilian executions since the 1960s, and introducing the death penalty would mark a dramatic shift. Others argue that the political motivations behind the bill, especially coming from far-right leaders, reflect deeper transformations within Israeli society and governance. In diplomatic missions abroad, Palestinian ambassadors receive instructions to follow up on Awadallah's letters. They begin arranging meetings, crafting talking points, and ensuring that the message reaches foreign ministers, parliamentary committees, and international legal bodies. Their outreach is particularly directed at countries known for advocating human rights and international legal norms. Within Palestinian society, reactions to the death penalty bill vary from outrage to weary resignation. Many view it as another step in a long series of punitive measures that accompany occupation. Families of detainees express deep fear. Some share stories of relatives who were arrested as teenagers, convicted under military regulations, or held under administrative detention for long periods without charge. They worry that the new law, if passed, will only deepen their suffering. Legal experts in Palestinian universities and research centres begin discussing the potential implications for international law. They debate whether the Palestinian Authority could seek advisory opinions from international courts, whether states could apply diplomatic pressure collectively, and whether existing treaties could be invoked to challenge the bill. Some suggest that even states with close ties to Israel may find it difficult to remain silent in the face of a law that permits executions of prisoners belonging to an occupied population. Meanwhile, within Israeli society, the bill sparks intense debate. Some families of Israeli victims of attacks support the law, arguing that it could provide a sense of justice. Others, including several Israeli human rights organizations, warn that the death penalty has historically been misused in conflict zones and that it would further inflame tensions. Several legal scholars argue that the bill risks violating basic principles of Israeli constitutional law and may struggle to withstand judicial scrutiny. All of these perspectives shape the international conversation unfolding around Awadallah's press conference. His words, though delivered in Ramallah, echo far beyond the walls of the ministry. As the day progresses, the press conference footage circulates across news platforms. Accompanied by commentary, analysis, and reactions from regional and global actors, Awadallah's closing remarks reinforce the Palestinian Authority's determination to continue pushing on diplomatic, legal, and political fronts. Although he does not outline specific actions publicly, officials familiar with the matter suggest that Palestinian representatives may soon present briefs to international investigators, request emergency discussions at multilateral forums, or seek new resolutions addressing the treatment of detainees. As the press conference wraps up, Awadallah exits the hall amid a flurry of camera shutters. Journalists rush to send out updates, while analysts begin considering the broader implications of the Palestinian Authority's warnings. Outside, the Palestinian flags continue to wave, embodying both national identity and the enduring struggle for rights and recognition. Over the next several hours, the story remains prominent across regional media. News anchors recap Awadallah's warnings, broadcasting excerpts from his statements and providing context about the legislative process in Israel. They explain that the bill still requires 2 additional readings in the Knesset before becoming law, meaning that international pressure could still influence the outcome. This possibility becomes a focal point in the discourse among diplomats and activists following the story. In the halls of the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, staff members continue responding to inquiries, issuing statements, and coordinating with embassies abroad. For them, today's event marks only the beginning of a longer campaign. They understand that confronting the death penalty proposal will require sustained global engagement, careful legal groundwork, and persistent diplomatic pressure. As night descends over Ramallah, the press conference room stands empty again. Chairs sit in neat rows, microphones are unplugged, and the podium remains where Awadallah left it. But the message delivered here has already travelled far beyond these walls. It has entered the capitals of nations, the offices of human rights organisations, and the corridors of international institutions. And for the Palestinian Authority, this global conversation is exactly what it hopes to generate: pressure that could halt a law they believe threatens the lives and rights of thousands. Through the day's developments, one theme remains clear. The struggle surrounding the Israeli death penalty bill is not confined to legal text or parliamentary procedure. It is deeply tied to decades of conflict, trauma, and competing narratives. Omar Awadallah's appeal for international intervention underscores a political landscape where legal decisions reverberate across borders, identities, and futures. And as the world watches, the controversy surrounding the bill becomes yet another test of diplomacy, justice, and the fragile boundaries between security and human rights in one of the world's most contested regions.
وقضية عادلة هي قضية الأسرى والمعتقلين في سجون الاحتلال. هذه المنظومة وجذر هذه المنظومة التي يجب أن تنتهي، والتي ومطالبة هذه الدول بالتحرك بشكل سريع لوقف هذا القانون، بالإضافة إن كان القانوني أو السياسي أو الدبلوماسي بشأن قضية الأسرى. هناك استمرار القائمة بالاحتلال تقوم دوما باستخدام أدوات مختلفة بما هو الإجابة عن ذلك. نعم. ثانيا أن ملف الأسرى قدم من أولى الملفات.
بيبي
Letters have been sent to foreign ministers in all countries around the world to discuss the law concerning prisoners and the execution of Palestinian detainees, and to urge these countries to act quickly to stop this law. In addition, we have heard, followed and documented horrific testimonies, some of which have been submitted not only to international courts but also to international bodies such as special rapporteurs and international commissions of inquiry. We will be using all the available diplomatic, legal and political tools to bring the perpetrators of the crime of torture against our prisoners to justice, of the crime of sexual abuse, of the crimes of rape that we documented, and all the organisations in Palestine already documented these testimonies. We will be following this track legally, politically and diplomatically.
Documented these testimonies. We will be following this track legally, politically and diplomatically.